What's that?
Oh, it was spinning. I didn't know why it was taking so long to record.
Oh, I'm not sure either, but we're good to go now.
Uh-oh, it says Mark Finn was removed from the meeting. Audra Cabrera was removed from the meeting.
Oh, no.
That means they didn't leave. They were removed. I don't know. Okay, we'll keep going. Maybe somebody can check in with them. Text them or something. Okay, can you see my slide? We're good to go?
We're good to go.
All right. So here we are, Hyperdocs. I can't remember who has seen this and who hasn't, but if you're from the generation that played Oregon Trail in school, seems like we're the ones that can survive through this pandemic, maybe, hopefully. And then this was one that I found early on. We are still sending them back and forth, so this one feels like I sent this one to Andy or he sent this to me like a month ago. But yeah, so we all want to stay inside until the government tells us to. Very, very American. Okay, so today's about the Hyperdoc and exactly what that is. And if you are familiar with the Hyperdoc handbook, this is where most of the presentation is coming from. And that book is hyperlinked. So it'll take you right to Amazon and you can order it if you wish. It is one of our favorite books. I was still in 4th grade, I think, when this came out or when we got a hold of it. And that summer, Andy and I took the course online with the authors. And that's also available to you. So if you ever feel like taking the course in the summertime, it's called the Hyperdoc Bootcamp. But one of the authors, Lisa Highfill, in the best way I think to kind of describe what a Hyperdoc is, she said, be a lesson designer, not a lesson assigner, because, you know, people will say that a Hyperdoc is, I have friends that say, oh, I made a Hyperdoc, and then I see it and it's just links on a doc, maybe with a few activities, but really a Hyperdoc is where you've designed an entire lesson with all of the lesson components within one document so that the students are going through the document, and as they're going, they're growing and their understanding is growing, they're digesting and consuming the information, and then in some aspect they are curating. So what is a Hyperdoc? A Hyperdoc is a way of encompassing the lesson components into one document that is thoughtful and is in a strategic manner. So again, it's really about thinking about all of the lesson components, you know, from your engaging, your activating strategy, all the way to your summarizing and your extension and your summarizer. You know, all of those things are in one document, even if the document goes into 2 pages, or if you're doing a slide deck and it's in multiple different slides, but it's in one file, really. So this is a really good thing for obviously within school in a brick and mortar classroom, but this is ideal and really lends itself nicely to online learning. Hyperdoc is a kind of, ever since it came out, you know, the Hyperdoc handbook, it's really been I don't know, a buzzword, I guess you could say. And so Matt Miller got a hold of it, and he had a guest blogger. If you're not familiar with Matt Miller, he does the Ditch That Textbook, Ditch That Homework. He's worked with Alice Keeler. And if you click on that rectangle, that will take you directly to his blog and his website, which has other things besides Hyperdocs that I would highly recommend checking out. But really, they're talking about when you create Hyperdocs are about 3 things when you create them. And if you don't think about these 3 things, then you'll be missing a really important component of the lesson design. So first and foremost is thinking about the pedagogy, and really like the lesson design is not fruitful without great pedagogy. So you really have to be mindful in the flow and the design and the construction of the document in the components of the lesson. And then obviously you want to think about using the best content available. One of the best things that technology does for us is that it brings content that we don't normally have into our classroom. It kind of takes away those walls, because, you know, if you're teaching social studies or whatever it may be, you know, things like science, things are evolving all of the time, and you're able to go and get those resources online using that content. So you want to make sure that you're using the best content available. And obviously we're incorporating technology in a meaningful way. We're not just saying, hey, we're going to have you on a doc to have you on a doc. Like, we're using the doc so that they can go through the lesson in a meaningful way. So the benefits of a hyperdoc. We're not lecturing them. It's not like I'm standing in the middle of the room, even if we're in a brick and mortar classroom and there's no COVID-19 going on. If we're back in school, and your students are doing a hyperdoc, you are more of a facilitator and not a dictator. You're not really talking to them. You're the guide on the side. There's a lot of flexibility in that students get to choose maybe their pathway. Students get to choose the source that, maybe you give them 4 sources and they pick 2, and then whatever goes with their learning style, that's how they learn based on the sources that they've chosen. They don't have to do all 4. And also their pacing. Not all kids work at the same pace. I know even with Andy and I, we're the same age. We're like 6 months apart, and he can read 5 books in the time I read 1. So I'm just a really slow reader, and he reads very quickly. So we just have, kids are like that from the start and all through life. So hyperdocs allow kids to go through with different pacing. Multimodal learning, basically, you can embed a video, you can embed a podcast, a blog, an article, a PDF, your teacher pay teacher resources, all of those things. But it's a different way of thinking. You can diversify their learning because you don't need to always provide a text. TED Talks are great, podcasts are great, texts are great, but if you have 6 resources for them to choose from, it's always a good idea to give them different modes of learning instead of all of the text. And I did say facilitate rather than dictate. And then privacy and accommodation. So if I'm handing out or if I'm pushing out a Google Doc or any type of hyperdoc in my Google Classroom, each student has their own copy usually. So I can provide feedback to them in a private way. Versus if we're sitting at a small group table, or if I'm sitting next to their desk and I give them feedback, even if I whisper, someone in my classroom can hear the feedback I'm giving to that child, and they don't always enjoy that. Some of them are fine, but some of them, if they're really struggling, maybe they don't want to hear what their peers, or they don't want their peers to hear what you're saying. So you can provide feedback in these docs that are just between you and that student. And obviously, you can provide them with accommodations. So if I give Andy, if I give Andy a hyperdoc and I give Stephanie a hyperdoc, they can be different, and Andy and Stephanie don't know the difference. So they relatively look the same, but because I push them out in Google Classroom and I'm not putting that onto their desk, they don't know that they have different combinations within their hyperdoc. So, and a little shameless plug here, this is a post on how hyperdocs can transform your teaching. And it's been pushed out by Cult of Pedagogy. And if you're not familiar with Cult of Pedagogy, I highly recommend checking it out. That post is older. I think it's from 2016, but it's still relevant, very, very insightful. But you also, fair warning, may fall down the rabbit hole of other awesome resources because she has thousands and thousands of instructional strategies and resources available to you. So if you ever get a chance, check out Cult of Pedagogy. Okay, so a hyperdoc is not a Google Doc embedded with links. It is a doc of some sort where all components of the learning cycle really have been embedded into one spot or one file. So on this page, I have embedded or linked, templates for you. So I'm just going to go over 2 before I show you this one. The first one I have is just a blank template, but it has to do with the 5E model. And this is just one of the models that you can use. And it's called the 5E model because it starts out with E's. There's words in here that don't start with E, so I don't know. It kind of bothers me. But basically, it just kind of structures your lesson design in a way that fits the brain. So you have engage, obviously that's your activator, explore, they start to figure it out and try infographics and videos. Explain, they really start to think about the content in a deeper way. And then they apply. Whatever they've learned, they apply. And then they can share, reflect, and then there's extend down here at the bottom. But you don't have to use all of those stages. Not at all. So I created one when I taught 5th grade, which just has 3. I didn't use them all. I have explore, explain, and apply. And each of the different levels or each of the different stages has a different DOK level. And this, as soon as my computer loads, I will zoom in for you. But So my point is that you don't need to be overwhelmed and use all of those 5E. I mean, you could to make it a longer lesson, but when you're just starting out for you and the kids, it's probably best to keep it simple and maybe do 2 or 3 of the stages. So Explore for me was a DOK one. I embedded a YouTube video on the causes of the Civil War. So they were just identifying 3 major causes of the Civil War, like states' rights, slavery, sectionalism. I can't remember exactly what this one went over. But here's where I provided some multimodal diversity, because then they had to explore sources. They didn't have to do all of them. They had to explore enough sources that they could figure out how slavery was embedded in all causes of the Civil War. And then they posted their findings to a class Padlet. Super simple. And then by the end, this is like a DOK3. I gave them quotes from different people that were in government. So obviously this one, the top one is from Mississippi. So he is more of a Confederate, and then someone from the Union. So obviously they had to read that, because quotes are important, because what you say is what you believe. And that's usually influenced by those who are around you and where you live. So they had to analyze the quotes from people that lived in different areas, and they had to determine how the cause may have impacted each person, or that slavery, just embedded causes had affected each person. So that was just a quick hyperdoc that took them through lesson components, right? It wasn't just here's a doc with links. So that's what makes it a hyperdoc. So then I also have a link here for templates that come right from the website. So as you will see, there's the 5E model right here, but then there's simpler versions. And you don't have to use these, but when starting out, sometimes it's overwhelming, and it can be really nice just to remix somebody else's, or just to use a skeleton of some sort that's already been made, because there's a lot to think about besides packaging when you begin making a hyperdoc. So one of my favorite things to do, if you are close with me, is to make slides beautiful. So I love making pretty slides. And one of my favorite ways to make a hyperdoc is to use a slide deck. And so this is one I made in 4th grade, or for 4th grade. And I just want to show you quick how to do it. There are multiple different slides that students would go through. And again, let me go to the next one. So in the right-hand corner, you'll see where it says engage. So I labeled the stages in the right-hand corner. So that was my activator. And then I gave them a quote of some sort. Sharks are among the most perfectly constructed creatures in nature. Some forms had survived for 200 million years. And this is a integrated hyperdoc that focused on a ELA standard as well as a science standard. And so the science standard was adaptations. And basically they were learning that, yes, sharks did evolve and did have adaptations, but because they were so well constructed from the beginning, they didn't evolve as much as the other creatures. So anyways, within each of the stages, I have different things for them to do. Like here's a YouTube playlist that they would have to add shark species to. And then as you go, eventually they are producing some type of product. So this hyperdoc took them on a journey of learning, and they were asked to digest content of some sort and then create. And then by the end, they had, let's go back. Then they had a reflection piece, which was just go back to the quote from the beginning and talk about how their thinking of the quote changed through the process of the doc. So one of the things that you can do to make your docs, your slides pretty, whether you're making a hyperdoc or not, is to use the add-on Unsplash Images. So Andy and I, if you see docs, if you see slides from us, whether it's a hyperdoc or a presentation like the one we're doing today, all of our backgrounds come from Unsplash Images, and they're completely free. So if you're on a district device and you go to add-ons, Unsplash Images should be there. If not, you just get add-ons and then type in Unsplash Images, and it will automatically populate for you. If you don't want to use the background images, you'd rather use a template. I know that Google Slides has their own templates, but you can use Slides Gala or Slides Carnival. And both of those sites will give you free templates that when you click on them will go right to your drive. They'll make a copy, it'll go right to your drive, and then you can start editing them right away. Because that's another way to make your your Hyperdoc or even just regular slides more engaging. So all of this can be very overwhelming. I know when we first started, there's a lot to think about besides the packaging, the way they look, knowing what web tools to use, knowing how the G Suite works. But on top of that, it's like, how do you design a lesson flow so that students are without you and you're more of a facilitator? You're not telling them what to do every step. So there's actually progressions in the steps of creating a Hyperdoc. So at first, stage one is the more of like a crawl where you're thinking about you're learning about the G Suite and how do slides work? How do I embed a video? If I want to embed a video, do I want to do it in docs or do I want to do it in slides? And if you've noticed, in slides you can embed it so you can see the picture, but in doc you can't embed it. It has to be a link. So those are the type of things you have to think about with your lesson design and the technology piece. So then as you move into like the creation aspect of it is when you maybe start to remix and use somebody else's Hyperdoc, or you found a skeleton of one and you filled it in. And then as you go, you can create an entire unit of Hyperdocs and really think about Hyperdocs as in a long-term transforming way. So here's the doc that talks about the different stages of comfortability. I don't even know if that's a word, but it's basically the progression of becoming a Hyperdoc creator. And so this document is, if you click on it, it's yours to use. And within each stage, it talks about some different resources. There's some links for you that you could click on, and then you can even get some lesson plans already made. So feel free to use that and use it as another resource. So there's different steps, and obviously it's the same way when you're creating a lesson, like when you're creating a regular lesson plan. So it's not that new. First you're thinking about the desired outcome, like what do you want the kids to walk away with? And then you're thinking about the cycle of learning, but digitally within a doc. And then step 3 is pretty important. What app are you going to use this in? Are you going to use it in Docs, Slides, Maps, or Google Sites? I've seen some pretty awesome ones in Google Sites. I think that's more of an advanced feature, but some really cool things people are doing with kids in Google Sites with a Hyperdoc, or using the sites as a Hyperdoc. And then determine your workflow. Are they going to be collaborating? Are they going to have their own copy? What is it? And then step 5 is super important, super important. It's nothing that is going to make or break your product, but the more you think about page color, font, and images, the more successful the kids will be with it. If it's super engaging and I, for lack of a better term, pretty, the kids tend to do better with it. Like any slide that I've or Andy has ever created, the background of the slides is super impactful. So like if you look at this slide, there's a superhero in the background and that's not the theme, but because it went along with the word. So the background of your slide is actually a mental anchor for the learning that's occurring on that slide. So if you notice that, like, go back to one that has like a succulent, these are sharks. But like this one, we used a succulent at the beginning of the presentation as like a calming effect because, there's a lot of learning going on and people are uncertain about what's happening and they don't know how many presentations they should go to. So in the beginning, we tend to try to use some calming slides. So really the background of your slide is kind of a mental anchor for whatever learning is occurring during that time. So here is a nice little chart before I get into the examples that kind of reinforces what the difference is between what a Hyperdoc is and maybe what a doc is with links, okay? So a Hyperdoc is something that's carefully created. It requires educators to have the mindset of like thoughtful, strategic pedagogy, and it's visually engaging, which is kind of what we were talking about, with your packaging. And it's how students use the technology to create and collaborate. It's not a new web app or tool. So one of the things that's super, I guess, helpful on this page would be, we have some examples embedded. So here's some mentor Hyperdocs that align with the SAMR model. So the farther down you go on this page, the simpler they'll be. So redefinition is like the highest level of SAMR. Whoops, sorry guys, my computer's slow. So, oh my gosh. Basically, I don't know what's happening. happening? There we go. Okay, we're gonna just go back. I'll show you on the side. So the green is like pretty intense. So that's like the highest change. So those are more complex mentor hyperdocs. Think about a mentor text, a text that teaches students how to write or how to do some type of literacy component. Well, the mentor hyperdocs are in the same way. So these are going to teach you about the different stages, but you can still use them with kids. So they're, you can use it, make a copy in your drive, and then you can edit or remix it and send it out to kids. So this is still going to do. And then over here, if you click where it says here in green, you can actually go to a Google Drive that is available to everyone for free. So if I teach language arts, then I will have a Google folder full of hyperdocs that many, many teachers all over the United States have already made that I can choose, add to my drive, and remix. I promise you they're there. I even restarted my computer. I just think it's getting tired from so many presentations. So I'll come back to that. It'll load. But it's right here if you're interested in using that. The best thing to do is to start out using somebody else's before you use your own. And it's almost there. So there's some organization to this, not much, like grammar hyperdocs, poetry hyperdocs. And then as you go through, there's a bunch of hyperdocs people have made, all different grade levels, all different subcategories within this subject. So they're all there, free to use, and you'll just want to make sure that when you choose one, that you are checking the links. Like, don't just make a copy and push it out to students, because somebody might have a link in there that goes to their class Padlet. So you'd want to make your own Padlet or your own Flipgrid and then put the link in that same spot that the other teacher did. It's still helpful that all of these are shared, because then you at least have the structure and the content. So you're going to have, to summarize, you're going to have two different kind of links to look at. One will be a content link where students are looking at content and going out to read something or watch a video, which is usually 90% fine. You don't have to change those. But it's the personal links to your Padlet, your Flipgrid, your Google Classroom, things like that that are personal that you can't use of other teachers. That's why you want to make a copy and then check all the links. So I know we're running almost out of time here, but the last thing is, here is, if you click on this blue, it says resources. This is available for everybody, where if you're like, okay, I don't know what tools to use within Engage or what strategies to use within the Engage step, or even where to start, this will give you some ideas. So like for Engage, one of the popular things to do is to use a YouTube video. So like if you want to get them interested in sharks or the Civil War or whatever it is, you find a really engaging video. Maybe you've created your own in Screencastify and you've uploaded it to YouTube. That's an introduction to whatever it is. You want to embed a YouTube video. You can use a quote. This one's one of my favorite ones, where you can use a meme or to introduce, or whatever it is. But so each of the stages, the stack is really nice because it goes through each of the stages and it will suggest different resources or strategies to use within each of the stages. And again, there's a ton of different things that you can use. There's more than what's on the stack. This is just a starting point. So you might think of something that's not already on here. And this is just an idea bank. But it's there. So it's available for everybody to have in their drive. We're almost out of time. Does anyone have any questions?
I'll put the presentation link in there for anybody that came later or got kicked out and came back in. This will also be uploaded to our YouTube channel playlist, as well as the slides in that folder that we shared out.
Hey, I have a question. So regarding, through your presentation, I was kind of like trying to keep up with you, and I was also looking at other things on my computer on the web. And so I might have missed this point. If I'm creating a link in a document that takes the student to Google Drive, like a PDF, what do I need to know about that? Will that, like, what do I have to do to make sure that always works?
Are
Like
you
concerns like, do they actually have access to the thing because that's on my drive? What if they're on two different machines or all that kind of stuff?
I think the best bet is if you aren't sure about a PDF, because it's like if the PDF is housed on a public website, you're good to go. If the PDF is owned by somebody else, I would add that to your drive if you can, and then change the settings so that everybody can see it, not just SYCSD. That way, if they're on a different device or something or some fluke or whatever, they can still access your PDF. So like when you're changing the permission settings, it's one of the top two, because we're usually in the middle or in the bottom. If that makes sense. I usually go for the world. The
Okay.
world symbol. Yeah.
Thank you.
Question. Oh, Janky, you're so nice.